The Blockade Runners, by Jules Verne. Chapter 6. Sullivan Island Channel. 2 days after the meeting with the Iroquois, the Dolphin found herself abreast of the Bermudas, where she was assailed by a violent squall. These isles are frequently visited by hurricanes, and are celebrated for shipwrecks. It is here that Shakespeare has placed the exciting scene of his drama, The Tempest, in which Ariel and Caliban dispute for the empire of the floods. The squall was frightful. James Playfair thought once of running for one of the Bermudas, where the English had a military post. It would have been a sad waste of time, and therefore especially to be regretted. Happily the Dolphin behaved herself wonderfully well in the storm, and, after flying a whole day before the tempest, she was able to resume her course towards the American coast. But if James Playfair had been pleased with his ship, he had not been less delighted with the young girl's bravery. Miss Halliburtt had passed the worst hours of the storm at his side, and James knew that a profound, imperious, irresistible love had taken possession of his whole being. "Yes," said he, "this brave girl is mistress on board. She turns me like the sea, a ship in distress. I feel that I am foundering. What will Uncle Vincent say? Ah, poor nature! I am sure that if Jenny asked me to throw all this accursed cargo into the sea, I should do it without hesitating, for love of her." Happily for the firm of Playfair and Company, Miss Halliburtt did not demand this sacrifice. Nevertheless, the poor captain had been taken captive, and Crockston, who read his heart like an open book, rubbed his hands gleefully. "We will hold him fast," he muttered to himself, "and before a week is past my master will be quietly installed in one of the best cabins of the Dolphin." As for Miss Jenny, did she perceive the feelings which she inspired? Did she allow herself to share them? No one could say, and James Playfair least of all. The young girl kept a perfect reserve, and her secret remained deeply buried in her heart. But whilst love was making such progress in the heart of the young captain, the Dolphin sped with no less rapidity towards Charleston. On the 13th of January, the watch signalled land 10 miles to the west. It was a low-lying coast, and almost blended with the line of the sea in the distance. Crockston was examining the horizon attentively, and about 9 o'clock in the morning he cried, "Charleston Lighthouse!" Now that the bearings of the Dolphin were set, James Playfair had but one thing to do, to decide by which channel he would run into Charleston Bay. "If we meet with no obstacles," said he, "before 3 o'clock we shall be in safety in the docks of the port." The town of Charleston is situated on the banks of an estuary 7 miles long and 2 broad, called Charleston Harbor, the entrance to which is rather difficult. It is enclosed between Morris Island on the south and Sullivan Island on the north. At the time when the Dolphin attempted to force the blockade, Morris Island already belonged to the Federal troops, and General Gillmore had caused batteries to be erected overlooking the harbor. Sullivan Island, on the contrary, was in the hands of the Confederates, who were also in possession of Moultrie Fort, situated at the extremity of the island. Therefore it would be advantageous to the Dolphin to go as close as possible to the northern shores to avoid the firing from the forts on Morris Island. 5 channels led into the estuary: Sullivan Island Channel, the Northern Channel, the Overall Channel, the Principal Channel, and lastly the Lawford Channel, but it was useless for strangers, unless they had skilful pilots on board, or ships drawing less than 7 feet of water, to attempt this last. As for Northern and Overall Channels, they were in range of the Federalist batteries, so it was no good thinking of them. If James Playfair could have had his choice, he would have taken his steamer through the Principal Channel, which was the best, and the bearings of which were easy to follow. But it was necessary to yield to circumstances, and to decide according to the event. Besides, The captain of the Dolphin knew perfectly all the secrets of this bay, its dangers, the depths of its water at low tide, and its currents, so that he was able to steer his ship with the greatest safety as soon as he entered one of these narrow straits. The great question was to get there. Now this work demanded an experienced seaman, and one who knew exactly the qualities of the Dolphin. In fact, 2 Federal frigates were now cruising in Charleston waters. Mr. Matthew soon drew James Playfair's attention to them. "They are preparing to ask us what we want on these shores," said he. "Ah, well, we won't answer them," replied the captain, "and they will not get their curiosity satisfied." In the meanwhile, the cruisers were coming on full steam towards the Dolphin, who continued her course, taking care to keep out of range of their guns. But in order to gain time, James Playfair made for the southwest, wishing to put the enemy's ships off their guard. The latter must have thought that the Dolphin intended to make for Morris Island Channel. Now there they had batteries and guns, a single shot from which would have been enough to sink the English ship, so the Federals allowed the Dolphin to run towards the southwest, contenting themselves by observing her without following closely. Thus for an hour the respective situations of the ships did not change, for James Playfair, wishing to deceive the cruisers as to the course of the Dolphin, had caused the fires to be moderated, so that the speed was decreased. However, from the thick volumes of smoke which escaped from the chimneys, it might have been thought that he was trying to get his maximum pressure, and consequently his maximum of rapidity. "They will be slightly astonished presently," said James Playfair, "when they see us slip through their fingers." In fact, when the captain saw that he was near enough to Morris Island, and before a line of guns, the range of which he did not know, he turned his rudder quickly, and the ship resumed her northerly course, leaving the cruisers 2 miles to windward of her. The latter, seeing this maneuver, understood the steamer's object and began to pursue her in earnest, but it was too late. The Dolphin doubled her speed under the action of the screws, and distanced them rapidly. Going nearer to the coast, a few shell were sent after her as an acquittal of conscience, but the Federals were outdone, for their projectiles did not reach half-way. At 11 o'clock in the morning, the steamer ranging near Sullivan Island, thanks to her small draught, entered the narrow strait full steam. There she was in safety, for no Federalist cruiser dared follow her in this channel, the depth of which, on an average, was only 11 feet at low tide. "How?" cried Crockston. "And is that the only difficulty?" "Oh, Master Crockston," said James Playfair, "the difficulty is not in entering, but in getting out again." "Nonsense," replied the American. "That does not make me at all uneasy. With a boat like the Dolphin, and a captain like Mr. James Playfair, one can go where one likes, and come out in the same manner." Nevertheless, James Playfair, with telescope in his hand, was attentively examining the route to be followed. He had before him excellent coasting guides, with which he could go ahead without any difficulty or hesitation. Once his ship was safely in the narrow channel which runs the length of Sullivan Island, James steered bearing towards the middle of Fort Moultrie as far as the Pinckney Castle, situated on the isolated island of Shute's Folly. On the other side rose Fort Johnson, a little way to the north of Fort Sumter. At this moment the steamer was saluted by some shot which did not reach her, from the batteries on Morris Island. She continued her course without any deviation, passed before Moultrieville, situated at the extremity of Sullivan Island, and entered the bay. Soon Fort Sumter on the left protected her from the batteries of the Federalists. This fort, so celebrated in the Civil War, is situated 3 miles and a half from Charleston, and about a mile from each side of the bay. It is nearly pentagonal in form, built on an artificial island of Massachusetts granite. It took 10 years to construct, and cost more than $900,000. It was from this fort, on the 13th of April, 1861, that Anderson and the Federal troops were driven, and it was against it that the first shot of the Confederates was fired. It is impossible to estimate the quantity of iron and lead which the Federals showered down upon it. However, it resisted for almost 3 years, but a few months after the passage of the Dolphin it fell beneath General Gillmore's 300-pounders on Morris Island. But at this time it was in all its strength, and the Confederate flag floated proudly above it. Once past the fort, the town of Charleston appeared, lying between Ashley and Cooper rivers. James Playfair threaded his way through the buoys which marked the entrance of the channel, leaving behind the Charleston lighthouse, visible above Morris Island. He had hoisted the English flag, and made his way with wonderful rapidity through the narrow channels. When he had passed the quarantine buoy, he advanced freely into the center of the bay. Miss Halliburtt was standing on the poop, looking at the town where her father was kept prisoner, and her eyes filled with tears. At last the steamer's speed was moderated by the captain's orders. The Dolphin ranged along the end of the south and east batteries, and was soon moored at the quay of the North Commercial Wharf. End of chapter.